Hi, I'm Kaylee Panzer, and this is my special education interview with Heather Crawford. Heather, can you give us a little bit of your background information?
Sure. My name is Heather Crawford. I'm a learning sport teacher for 5th and 6th grade at the Donegal Intermediate School. I've taught for 12 years as a learning sport teacher, and I have my master's in special education. I also serve as our elementary special education department chair.
Why did you become a special education teacher?
I will be honest with you, I did not expect to become a special education teacher when I graduated from college. I got my dual cert because they told us we'd be more marketable if we had it. This job actually came up 12 years ago, and I applied and took it thinking I would end up switching to general education after a few years. However, I will probably never leave special education because I love it so much.
I'm sure of your 12 years, your days have changed and have looked different, but what does your typical workday look like for you, at least this past school year?
So for the past school year, it started with some sort of duty or coming in for our mandatory time of coming in, doing some schoolwork, and then it started with some sort of duty for the school. I have cafeteria duty, which I weirdly love, and then I have homeroom time where students get to come and do some missing work. But the bulk of my day is usually spent either pushing in and co-teaching with my general education teachers or running small group ELA or math for their replacement instruction.
And what is the hardest part of your job? What would you say that is and why?
I think the hardest part of the job is probably just the endless paperwork that we have to do. It can be hard to get everything finished in a timely manner and then still have time for prepping for the classes that we end up having to teach. So I feel like that's probably the most difficult part of the job.
Mm-hmm. And what do you find the most rewarding part of your job?
I think the part that I find most rewarding is when my students master their goals and they meet their goals, just because they have these absolute looks of joy and accomplishment on their faces, and that just makes everything worth it when you see them feel successful on things that they are not usually successful at.
Yeah, and I'm sure parents then as well, hearing that their kids are making that growth.
Yes,
just
I love it.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any students with significant behavioral challenges? And if you do, how do you deal with that?
I've definitely had a lot of students with behavior challenges throughout my career. I think the first and most important step is to make sure you have a relationship with the parents of that student as well as the student themselves. I think having those strong relationships allow you to get through those difficult times with the students and those difficult conversations you end up having to have with parents. I also think it's important to make sure that the student is getting what they need and to figure out why these behaviors are occurring, because we know that the behaviors are occurring for a reason, so we need to get to the bottom of that to be able to help them through it.
Mm-hmm. So understanding your kiddo.
Yep.
So in your opinion, you said about co-teaching and you said about pulling out students. So you're working with general education teachers throughout your job all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What do you see as the biggest difference between your job duties and those of general education teachers?
I really feel like the biggest difference comes down to the paperwork and just the amount of paperwork that we end up having to do in special education. We have the IEPs, we have our reevaluations, we have progress reports, and these are all things that general education teachers aren't usually a part of, other than filling out a blurb for us. So I feel like that's the biggest difference. A lot of the teaching ends up being very similar, other than maybe our groups are a little bit smaller and more focused than some groups that the general education teachers might run.
So what advice can you give to a graduate student that might be interested in a career with individuals with disability and special education?
I definitely think getting out there, giving it a try, and not giving up after 1 year, because that first year is going to be rough. But you learn and you do better every year following that. I think every year I learn something new that I need to do for the next year. And then also just celebrating those small victories in the day and remembering that all progress is good progress and that students will keep learning even if you have a bad day.
And so you would recommend if their college offers a dual cert or something like that,
absolutely,
to give it a try.
Less than it being it's not really, you have to do it to be more marketable. It's such a good understanding to have that special ed background, even if you never plan to go into special ed, because you will at some point encounter students with disabilities in your classroom. And so having that background and having that information will help you so much in the long run.
Yeah. What is one thing that has maybe given you some frustrations most as a special education teacher within just special education?
I think one of the biggest frustrations I have is when our students get labeled like your kids versus our kids, specifically when we're talking about students participating in the general education classroom. And then just having some teachers struggle with how to best support our students, and just having our kids not be properly supported in the general education classes, where we know with the right supports they could be successful.
What is one thing that then surprised you most about special education?
I think the thing that's probably surprised me the most would be the amount of pushback we sometimes get from teachers, administrators, even parents when it comes to their student learning. I think it can feel like a lot of hills that we have to climb when we know our students pretty well and we're trying to do what's best for them in that moment, and sometimes it just feels like you're constantly climbing up hills when you have that pushback. That was surprising to me, mostly because you feel like everyone should be involved in doing what's best for that student, and I think they are, but sometimes it can be difficult.
Yeah. And I'm sure you have many, like you said, holding on to that small successes that you do have, but what is one student success story that you will always hold on to?
So I had a student a few years ago. He is going to be an 8th grader this year, and he came into my classroom working at like a 2nd grade level, and you could see that reading was not his favorite. He didn't love working through the things that we had to work through, but after his 2 years in 5th grade and 6th grade, he ended up on grade level for reading fluency and up to like a 5th, 6th grade level for comprehension. And just watching him feel and see success in something that he had struggled in was amazing. He would participate in his gen ed classes. He was raising his hand. He was reading things out loud in the classroom that were like, he would have done that when I first met him. And just watching his confidence soar, and then having him go to the junior high and still be successful. I keep in contact with his parents to see how he's doing, and he has done amazing up there as well. So just like having that little push in 5th and 6th grade, he's doing amazing, and I think that's my favorite success story so far.
Well, thank you so much for sharing and answering my questions. You've obviously made a big impact on many students, so thank you, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.